What do I wish I knew about Indigenous cultural burning 15 years ago? In this podcast, I go over my notes and observations from the Salish Firekeepers Society's cultural burning workshop, which hosted Elder Joe Gilchrist, who discusses the importance of fire in Indigenous culture and how it's a right that needs to be brought back to Indigenous peoples, how the government needs to release its hold of this right and practice so we can use cultural burning practices as a way to help our forests come back and be managed the way that they should be. Welcome to the Hazardscape podcast, where we discuss Indigenous emergency management as our small contribution to enhancing Indigenous community public safety in our efforts to reconcile the relationship between the Crown and all nations. I'm going to be talking about cultural burning because I attended a workshop and I want to share my notes on Indigenous cultural burning and land stewardship. The Salish Firekeeper Society hosted it, and I'm just going to get the gentleman's name. Oh, Joe Gilchrist. Okay, here we go. If anybody knows Joe Gilchrist. So he was hosting the workshop, and it was all about cultural burning. And I'm going to share my notes with what I learned as a Munyao emergency manager. And if you haven't Googled the Salish Firekeepers Society, I would, highly recommend you go check out their information. But he was talking about traditional fire cycles, right? And how Indigenous peoples would burn the land every 2 to 4 years to kind of maintain meadows, wetlands, and healthy habitats for wildlife like moose, caribou, and deer. And without fire, forests would naturally progress from grass to brush to evergreen every 80 to 100 years, which would create like a really dangerous fuel buildup. So it was very interesting because he was saying that really fire practices were not able to be carried through mostly because of the smallpox, right? So since the late 1800s, the government had banned Indigenous fire use, which led to overgrown forests, declining berry medicine production, and reduced wildlife populations. Thank you for all the likes, everyone. Appreciate it. Apparently, TikTok suspended my ability to get GIFs for 10 minutes because I played the Tragically Hip at the start. Gord Downey's not happy. And so he's really linking like these modern mega fires from decades of fuel accumulation because Indigenous peoples have not been allowed to practice their rights on fire. And those smallpox epidemics and the residential schools basically destroyed intergenerational knowledge transfer around this. Like he figures, he quoted 80 to 90% population loss. He talked a lot too about how elders, report water that was once drinkable from creeks and rivers, and it's now polluted due to erosion from unhealthy forests, right? And that's even impacting the beaver ecosystem, which beavers populations have declined due to overhunting, and they need healthy deciduous vegetation maintained by periodic burning. So really important there to make sure that that 80 to 100 year cycle has to be maintained so we just don't have this massive buildup of those evergreens. Root. Oh, this was very interesting. The root system damage, which I kind of knew from people talking about in the logging industry, how it's impacting the salmon, which I'm sure a lot of people on here already are aware of. But because I'm recording this for a podcast, the Munyao people need to hear this, which is what Joe said I need to do. He said, take my notes and preach to the Munyao. So, yeah, and he mentioned too, Indigenous women had traditionally held land knowledge, right? So, tracking burning cycles, medicine locations, and hunting areas. So, that was the matriarchal knowledge system, which I still think that exists in my household today because my wife tracks everything that I do to make sure that I get things done. I'm just joking. She's not listening to this. Yeah, she probably will, and I'm probably dead meat for that. No, I'm just joking. Okay, global Indigenous solidarity. Similar fire stewardship practices exist worldwide, and he's been to other countries. He mentioned Australia, Bolivia, Algeria, Botswana. I don't know if he's been to all of those, but they're also facing colonial land management challenges. Yeah, I am sleeping with her. I will be sleeping with the rabbits tonight. Thank you there, Stacy. And oh yeah, lots of this higher need for global Indigenous solidarity because of those similar fire stewardship practices. So that kind of takes back to like how this Indigenous disaster map that I started creating on here live kind of talks to that, because it's I think that disaster map, as long as people are contributing, kind of like feed that solidarity piece, right? And sharing of information. Joe was saying that government relationships are shifting. Like right now, he sees the BC Wildfire Service is gradually becoming more supportive, though trust issues remain from broken promises. So yeah, I understand that, right? Because who at the end of the day really, really, truly trusts the government to maintain a long-term plan of action, right? Like, sure, today this is what they're saying, but who knows what's going to happen in 5-10 years, what government's going to be in place, and is that the same practices and the same support going to be around, right? That's always a big risk. And those are usually what I call like slow burn risks, because those kind of changes can happen gradually within the government system because it's so slow. It likes to meander and waste people's time, and it uses that as a strategy to kind of push things to the side in the hopes people will forget about them. But anyway, I'm not here to rant about the government this second. Okay. Industry perspective is changing. The forest industry is recognizing the need for diverse kind of age class forests and fire resilient ecosystems. So that's good to hear. It'll be interesting to see how that does at the end of the day play in with Canada's logging economy, but we'll see. Technology integrations. So there was some really good discussion about the need for especially youth to be out on the land learning from elders. However, there also needs to be technology integration around using weather apps, satellite data, modern monitoring, how that can all complement traditional knowledge for safer burning practices. So I think that's a really good insight from somebody who is, aging. He said he was aging. He said his age. I'm not going to say his age, but he's aging. And definitely great to see someone like that who has the knowledge and the experience kind of honing in on where the technology and the modern day systems can support. With, knowledge transfer also requires elders to actively, kind of like demonstrate or model practices on the land, not just, go to the classroom and sit in the classroom and talk about things. Siksika Nation used to get funding to burn chamomile on riverbanks for better. Yeah, really? Okay. Yeah, he was talking about sage and sweetgrass, but that's cool. Used to burning chamomile would create better sweetgrass. I'll have to tell my wife that. She's going to be extremely, yeah, that's very cool, man. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. As always, that is Stacy, my mentor. He's actually my boss. I have to suck up to him. Otherwise, I don't get my fry bread for this live. What else did they talk about? Oh, NGO or kind of nonprofit partnership. They're just, this question came up from, I think, an NGO that was in the workshop. And, again, they have a responsibility to support Indigenous leadership rather than imposing on it, right? With Western frameworks, kind of overlaying Western frameworks on traditional practices. And I think that's going to be hard for not-for-profits because especially the very older ones, right? There's some newer not-for-profits that are popping up that are mandated and have goals to be more Indigenous-led and inclusive. But I think when we get to the older NGOs that were maybe, created way before World War I, they have mandates that are rooted in, religion. They have mandates that are very old. They have donors that are aging, and all of those donors expect something, and they may not necessarily expect to get out of the way, right? They may not necessarily expect to say, yeah, it's okay if you use our donations to integrate more Indigenous practices. That's always a problem with the big not-for-profits, especially the religious-based ones that maybe kind of stick to a very rigid model of a certain religion. What else? Oh, household level impacts too, because wood stoves, right? Wood stoves and controlled burns remove forest fuel while providing warmth, mimicking like historical continuous fire use. So, another reason for good cultural burning practices or to use Indigenous is because that will ensure that supply of fuel for keeping homes warm, especially for the people that rely on them in kind of like the extreme cold areas, the Arctic, slightly lower than the 60th parallel. Great. We've got all this natural gas and all this oil and energy and diesel, but at the end of the day, when you're living up north, all of that can fail. Wood, your stored dried wood is not going to fail. What else? Economic argument. So yeah, again, it's kind of typical, right? Like billions spent on wildfire fighting could fund prevention through cultural burning and fuel reduction. So I think totally like a great case. But again, it's got to take Ottawa and the provinces and territories to buy into that. Health comparison. So this ties in with our work on like wildfire smoke contamination and how Indigenous Services Canada is investing so much money in health emergency management with the Emergency Management Assistance Program from ISC. They've kind of meshed those because the health risks on reserve and even off reserve and in urban areas, the health risk from fire smoke is so great. They're having to now mash health with normal EM. And Joe was saying that controlled seasonal smoke is preferable to catastrophic summer wildfire smoke that chokes out entire regions, which totally makes sense because you get that controlled seasonal smoke. It's lighter. You can even, who's that? Bro, we don't accept racist comments on here like that. So you can, when historically who wins the war, dude, what's going on? We're talking about disaster management and cultural burning practices here. So anyway, I love the trolls, right? You get the keyboard warriors on here, and they're trying to incite rage and things like that. I think that's what, I don't know if you're not trying to be like a typical white supremacist and that's meant to be something else, let me know, because sometimes I don't interpret the comments like people intend, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of classless. Let's see here. Health comparison. Yeah, so the seasonal culturally controlled burn smoke is better. Also, because with catastrophic wildfires, you get homes burning down and you get all the particulate from those homes in the air, and you don't want to be breathing in any of that. Plus, with how a lot of the new homes are being built, those chemicals leach into the ground, and it also causes water issues. You know, it messes with the soil for planting, lots of stuff like that. And he had this was a really great indicator for land health that some of the elders had shared with him. He said, if you can't walk barefoot on the land without injury from debris, the ecosystem needs restoration through fire. So basically, the land health indicator is being able to walk barefoot on the ground, which I thought was really cool. Much more. I like that way better than, you know, that guy in the States. He uses like the Waffle House indicator for all those like Waffle House restaurants. And, you know, the busier like a Waffle House is or something, you know, that's going to be an evacuation or whatever. I don't know. But yeah. So those were my takeaway notes from the Salish Firekeepers workshop. There, you know, obviously, I think Joe kind of went on to, you know, again, just to remind people about how fire was always part of Indigenous culture, living, teaching. It's how they ate, how they warmed their homes, warmed everything. It was always just part of life, right? It was just always there and always taught, and that was lost, you know, in the 1800s, especially around the smallpox epidemics and, you know, when residential schools destroyed intergenerational knowledge transfer. So yeah, I was really thankful to attend that. And again, like, even I find that Indigenous events like that are always a lot more opening and inclusive than non-Indigenous. Who are you working with? Like, who am I working with? You'll have to expand on that question. I'm here by myself right in this room. There's nobody behind me. Or do you mean like what organization am I with? I'm with Hazardscape. I'm not the government. And I was just at a cultural burning workshop where an elder who kind of partners with the Salish Firekeepers did a talk on cultural burning practices. So yeah, just going over the notes from that, because yeah, I am doing a podcast that's coming out today. It's supposed to come out yesterday, but it's coming out today on the Canadian Forest Center's report on the Jasper wildfire, which highlights, even though they were doing a lot of like mechanical fire treatments around Jasper National Park, so using wood chippers to chip wood and bringing in equipment and people and doing Fire Smart, which is supposed to reduce crown fires, those mechanical treatments didn't actually do what they were supposed to. There was still significant crown fires that contributed to the destruction of Jasper. So I think after coming out of this cultural burning workshop, yeah, there's definitely more of a need, or whatever you want to call it, to ensure that Indigenous peoples have their rights to continue their fire burning practices, so the land is better managed, right, as a long-term strategy to reduce wildfire risk across, well, the world, really. And I'll put in the note here, or in the comments, this is the news article from the Narwhal from November that talks about Joe Gilchrist and his work around promoting cultural burning practices. So take a look at that, and kind of their recommendation was, right, they're trying to get more youth involved, more people involved, and just really trying to continue to promote and spread that message. So yeah, if you have questions, I'm probably not the right person to ask, but you can always reach out to the Salish Firekeeper Society, or I think there's like the Thunderbird Collective, or the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. Those would be three primary contacts for information around what they're doing in terms of cultural burning practices. And if you watch, they also mentioned, I'll add, the Salish Firekeepers. If you watch their Facebook page, they will post on there when they're going to be doing burns. So if you're in the area or around there, maybe you can pop in on one or something and see one. Thanks for joining us at Hazardscape. You can subscribe to our YouTube and find our ad-free training videos by becoming a supporter on Patreon with a network of other Indigenous peoples looking to make their communities safer. And remember, know your hazardscape and be prepared.